Chuck Schumer suggested that to me about changing the name of Penn Station to Trump Station.
Was something the president floated in his conversation with Chuck Schumer. As for the funding, the president has addressed that separately himself.
That was President Trump saying it was Chuck Schumer's idea to rename Penn Station in Trump's honor. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt, however, seemed to have missed that message. It wasn't the only instance where the president was on a different wavelength from one of his biggest supporters. This time, it was about the racist portrayal of the Obamas posted to Trump's social media page. Here's how House Speaker Mike Johnson compared with the president.
The president said that was a big mistake. He did not like it. It was not something that he knew about before it was posted.
No, I didn't make a mistake. I mean, I look at a lot of thousands of things, and I looked at the beginning of it. It was fine.
You know, sometimes you just assume that he's got to be saying it's a mistake. Like there's no defense for putting up an image of the Obamas in the way that the president did on his personal social media platform. You just have to. I don't blame Mike Johnson. Like, of course, he's going to have to say this was a mistake because it was such a blatantly racist, sick, disgusting, sadistic image to put up that you just, what's the defense? It was a mistake. Like, you can't imagine the president would double down on it and actually say that he meant to do that it wasn't a mistake. He didn't make a mistake. That this blatant, disgusting racism that is recognized globally as a complete turnoff and a horrific act was not a mistake, Mike Barnicle.
But when you realize what it was,
yeah,
and people see it, and you understand the president's reaction to it, that he's not going to apologize, that he's not going to admit a mistake, he defines himself even further as to who he is. So are we really surprised?
Right. No, I mean, well, I kind of thought he would, Jonathan Lemire, I kind of thought he would know that perhaps there would be a very visceral and negative reaction to such a racist, disgusting post, that perhaps he would say somebody else did it and it was a mistake of someone else. But he didn't. He owned it.
Others on the White House staff suggested someone else did it, but President Trump
Everyone wanted
himself.
him to say it was a mistake.
He is pathologically incapable of admitting a mistake.
Yeah,
he
but
never
in this
has.
case,
on something as serious as this or as stupid as, I was reminded early in his first term, remember the tweet in the middle of the night about Covfefe or whatever that was? It was clear he fell asleep while typing. And later he tried to explain, like, actually, no, that's a deliberate message to someone who knows what I was talking about.
Remember where birtherism
I mean,
came
just
from.
nonsense. He can't admit a mistake. And it's also just, Willie, to the point about Speaker Johnson, who will never cross President Trump in anything. We had it again. We talked earlier in the show about the lawmakers who the grand jury did not indict, because they said you have to follow legal orders. Speaker Johnson last night said, well, I think they should have been indicted. Like, of course, he has to carry the president's water no matter what, to the point where he has given up the power of his office. He's nothing but a lackey.
It's the Speaker of the House, one of those powerful people in the world, just running around with a broom and a bin, cleaning up after the president of the United States. Has someone been fired for that? If the president didn't make a mistake,
no one gets
someone
fired.
did, or did they not feel bad that was posted?
Nope.
And if he's actually not reading or looking at the things he's posting, that's a whole other problem. The president of the United States just reposting, retruthing things that he doesn't look at. Someone watched the entire video and saw the former president and first lady depicted as apes.
Oh.
That's a fireable offense. Who got fired? Who's being held accountable for this? If the president's not going to take responsibility, someone needs to.
But we're hovering over the larger question around that incident and many other incidents, and it's this almost like a plot to so exhaust the American people, to so exhaust the news media even, with continued outrages, that after a while, an outrage becomes, oh, he did it again, and that's it, and we move on. That's where we are.
Well, I'm not moving on. I can't even believe that. And I can't believe Speaker Johnson, who's so religious and seems to be so
guided by the Bible.
kind and guided by the Bible. And yet he's asked about the most racist thing I think we've ever seen on Truth Social, and that's saying a lot, right? Is there anything worse that we've seen? And I mean, you could be at some sort of Klan event and they wouldn't think of that. But you had to work hard to think about that and put it up there. And Mike Johnson did not have the you-know-what to say, man, that was wrong. That must have been a mistake. God, I hope it was, because that is not the way we behave here in the United States of America. They are good people. You know, no McCain moment for him, but he claims to be so religious. I'm just confused. I think he might be not telling the truth about who he really is.
If you can't take a position on that,
I mean,
what
come
are
on.
you going to take a position on? That should be easy, but he
That's
can't
an
even
easy
do
one.
that.